I would rather die in misery than accept charity from that woman. While selling candy on the streets, a 13-year-old poor boy saves a blind elderly woman, only to discover she is the owner of the company that ruined his family. Guilt, pride, and lies can tear a family apart. But can a single chance at redemption repair what was broken? The true enemy isn't always where we expect, and the truth can unite what hatred has separated. But what if that truth comes too late? The biting wind whipped through the streets of Chicago as Liam pressed the plastic bag full of candies against his chest. Heavy clouds hung over the city, heralding an impending storm. He pulled the frayed hood of his sweatshirt tighter around his head, trying to shield himself from the cold, and walked along the wet sidewalks, dodging hurried passers-by. His routine was always the same. He left home with a few dozen candies in the bag, made his way to the usual strategic spots, and returned late at night, hopefully carrying some dollars to help with the household bills. But that afternoon, the gray sky mirrored the weight in his chest. The rent was overdue again, and the latest argument between his parents echoed in his mind like distant thunder. "I don't know what to do anymore, Noah." His mother, Grace's exasperated voice still burned in his thoughts. "I've humiliated myself begging for an advance on the cleaning jobs. You can't keep going like this." "And you think I can?" his father retorted, his voice heavy with frustration. "You think it's easy to wake up every day knowing your life's been destroyed? I spent 20 years in that damn factory. 20 years. And what do I have to show for it? Nothing." Liam had heard that conversation more times than he could count. Ever since the factory had closed, Noah had never been the same. The anger he felt towards the world only grew, and Grace, no matter how hard she tried to keep the family afloat, was crumbling. In the midst of it all, Liam felt small. He felt powerless. He took a deep breath and looked at the bustling scene around him. The traffic light turned red, and cars lined up, and there was his opportunity. He dashed into the middle of the avenue, gently tapping on the windows of the vehicles. "Good afternoon, sir. Candies to help my family?" Most drivers ignored him, averting their gaze or waving a quick "no" as they hurried on. Others handed him coins or a crumpled dollar before the light changed again. He was used to the indifference, but he never let it get to him. His eyes were always set on the next opportunity. After an hour and a half at the intersection, the bag was lighter, but still not enough. He headed to a nearby square, where the flow of pedestrians was greater. He quickened his pace as he felt the first drops of rain falling, chilling his skin. In the square, most people were huddled under awnings, waiting for the rain to pass. Liam watched the ebb and flow of people, searching for someone who seemed receptive. He approached an elderly woman carrying grocery bags. "Hello, ma'am. Would you like to buy some candies to help my family?" The woman looked at him with a weary expression, clutching her bags to her chest, as if he might steal them. "No, kid, get away from me," she said, moving past him and quickening her pace. Liam bit his lip and swallowed his frustration. He couldn't give up. He turned to a well-dressed man who was engrossed in his phone. "Good afternoon, sir. Would you like to buy some candies?" The man didn't even look at him. He simply walked by as if Liam were invisible. He sighed, closing his eyes for a moment. The wind picked up, and the raindrops began to fall harder. He needed to sell the rest before the downpour hit. He walked a bit further and spotted a group of young people sitting on a bench, laughing and scrolling through their phones. Taking a deep breath, he approached them. "Hey guys, want to buy some candies?" One of the boys, wearing a leather jacket and holding an energy drink, looked up and laughed. Candies, huh? What comes with that? A magic show? The others laughed. Liam already knew where this was going. I'm just selling, man, he replied, trying to hold his ground. Oh yeah, selling. The boy stood up and grabbed Liam's bag. How many do you have in here? Give that back to me. Liam tried to pull the bag back, but the boy held on tight. Chill out, I'm just looking. He turned the bag upside down, and all the candies spilled onto the wet pavement. The other boys laughed, while Liam watched what should have been his dinner scatter across the dirty ground. His chest burned, but he refused to cry. He bent down, picking up the candies one by one as the boys walked away, still laughing. The rain intensified. The wind grew stronger. He took a deep breath and stood up, feeling his clothes heavy and soaked. His fingers trembled. Holding the empty bag, he looked around. There was nothing more he could do there. His workday had ended sooner than expected. It was time to go home. Liam pushed the door open to the apartment, catching the musty smell mingled with the weak coffee his mother drank every night. Noah was slumped in the old armchair, watching the news without really paying attention. The atmosphere was heavy, as always. Grace glanced at him and noticed his wet clothes, frowning. Did you get caught in the rain? A little, he murmured, tossing the empty bag into a corner. Did you manage to sell everything? Liam hesitated. If he told the truth, it would only make his mother more worried. So he lied. I did. Grace sighed and looked at the envelope of bills on the table. The rent due date was marked in red. 3 days left to pay. She rubbed her temples. I'll figure something out, she murmured to herself. Noah, across the room, scoffed. I'll figure something out. I'll figure something out, he repeated with a bitter laugh. I'd like to know what that something is, Grace. Do you have a better suggestion? She shot back, her voice weary. Or are you just going to sit there complaining? Silence fell over the room. Liam clenched his fists. They were going to start again. Every night, the same argument. If I still had my job, Noah began, but Grace interrupted him. Yes, Noah, we know. You worked 20 years in that factory. 20 years, I get it. But it's been 2 years since it closed. You need to stop living in the past. Noah stood up abruptly, causing the chair to creak. You don't understand anything, Grace. Nothing. And he left, slamming the door. The silence that remained was worse than the shouting. Liam looked at his mother, who rubbed her eyes, exhausted. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to help. I'm going to take a shower, he murmured, walking toward the bathroom. The hot water hit his cold skin, but it couldn't wash away the weight he felt in his chest. His father's words hammered in his mind. What had really happened at that factory? Why did Noah never talk about it for real? Why did he seem to carry a burden greater than just losing his job? He needed to find out. He put on a dry sweatshirt and looked out the window. The storm was finally starting to pour down, covering the city in a gray shroud. In the back of his mind, an idea began to form. Maybe the factory was the key to understanding what was going on. But that could wait for another day. For now, all he could do was try to sleep, while the rain pounded on the roof of the apartment, and the echo of his parents' last argument still lingered in the air. Liam left the apartment the next morning, the sky still overcast, carrying the bag of candies again. But this time, something inside him had changed. He didn't just want to sell candies, he wanted answers. As he walked toward downtown, his eyes fixed on a specific place. The old rusted gate of the closed factory. He knew he shouldn't be there. But his instincts told him that it was exactly where he needed to be. He took a deep breath and moved forward. The rain battered the city like an endless curtain of water, turning the streets into a sea of shimmering reflections. The wind howled between the tall buildings, ripping leaves from trees and scattering wet papers across the asphalt. The streetlights flickered amidst the storm, while horns echoed along the avenue, mingled with the sound of water splashing under the tires of cars. Liam quickened his pace, his soaked shoes splashing with each step. The cold sliced through his skin like knives, and his thin shirt, now drenched, could no longer keep the shivers at bay. He knew that continuing to sell candies was pointless in such chaos. People were rushing, seeking shelter, and no one cared about a boy standing on the sidewalk, clutching a wet bag. That's when he saw her. An elderly woman, wearing a long dark coat and holding a cane, stood at the edge of the sidewalk. Her face was turned towards the busy avenue, as if trying to see the flow of cars. But there was something strange about her posture, an almost imperceptible hesitation, a slight tremor in the fingers gripping the cane. Liam felt a tightening in his chest. She couldn't see the cars. His heart raced as he realized the elderly woman was blind. He watched as she attempted to step forward. Her shoe touched the edge of the asphalt, and a taxi approached at high speed. The driver honked, but she didn't react. Liam's body moved before he even thought. He dropped his bag and dashed forward, feeling the adrenaline burning through his veins. The sound of tires screeching on the wet ground filled his ears, a thunderous mix with the chaos of the city. In a final impulse, he grabbed the frail woman's arm and pulled her back onto the sidewalk. The car passed just inches from them, splashing a jet of filthy water into the air. Liam felt his heart pounding against his ribs, his breath coming in gasps. His fingers still gripped the woman's fragile arm, which was now trembling. She let out a shaky sigh, her other hand pressed against her chest. "My God," she murmured, regaining her breath. "What just happened?" Liam blinked, trying to calm himself. "You almost got hit by a car." The elderly woman turned her face toward him, her milky eyes blinking under the rain. Her tone was one of confusion. "I didn't see the car." Liam swallowed hard. "I know." She remained silent for a moment, just feeling the firm grip of the boy. Then, a tired smile formed on her wrinkled lips. "You saved me." The cold wind cut like blades. Liam's clothes clung to his skin, and the chill seemed to have seeped into his bones. The woman squeezed his arm gently. "You're shaking." He didn't even try to deny it. "There's a cafe nearby. Come with me. Let me offer you something warm." Liam hesitated, but his eyes fell on the bag of soaked candies lying on the ground. There was no reason to stay there. With a resigned sigh, he nodded. "Okay." The elderly woman leaned on his arm, and together they walked to the cafe. The bell above the door jingled as they entered. The warmth of the place was like a welcome embrace, making Liam shiver as he felt the stark contrast between the cold outside and the coziness inside. The smell of fresh coffee and freshly baked bread filled his nose, and he realized he hadn't eaten anything decent in hours. The elderly woman walked with familiarity through the space, guiding herself by memory. A waitress approached, smiling upon seeing her. "Mrs. Whitmore, it's so good to see you. The weather out there is terrible." Liam froze. Whitmore. The name sounded like a distant bell, a memory he couldn't quite grasp. The elderly woman nodded politely. "Yes, my dear, and this young man just saved my life. Please, bring him a hot chocolate and my usual tea." The waitress smiled at Liam before walking away. He looked at the elderly woman, confused. "Your name is Whitmore?" She tilted her head slightly, as if studying his reaction. "Yes, Eleanor Whitmore." Something in the way she spoke exuded authority, but there was a sweetness in her voice that made him relax. "And you, my young hero, what is your name?" Liam Hayes." Eleanor smiled. "Well, Liam Hayes, I think you deserve more than a hot chocolate for saving me today." The waitress returned with the drinks. Liam held the cup between his cold hands, absorbing the warmth. He took a sip and felt the hot liquid sliding down his throat, offering immediate comfort. Eleanor sipped her tea slowly, as if evaluating the boy. "Do you live nearby?" Liam nodded. "On the west side?" "And what were you doing out in this rain?" He hesitated. Normally, he didn't like to talk about his life, but something in her gaze seemed trustworthy. "I was selling candies. My family needs money." Eleanor remained silent for a moment, as if reflecting on those words. "You seem mature for your age." Liam shrugged. "I guess I didn't have a choice." She gently set her cup down on the saucer and said something unexpected. "I have a foundation that helps talented young people pursue their studies. Would you like to meet her?" Liam blinked, surprised. "What?" "I can help you, Liam. You saved me today. I'd like to give back in some way." For a moment, he didn't know what to say, but something inside him warned him. Nothing in life came for free. He lowered his gaze. I don't know." Eleanor smiled softly. "You don't have to decide now. Just think about it." When Liam got home that night, the tension in the air was palpable. Noah was sitting at the table, the television on to some random news broadcast, but his eyes were vacant. Grace was in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner. He took off his wet coat and approached the table. "How was it out there?" his mother asked. Liam hesitated. "I met someone today, an elderly lady. She said she wants to help me." Noah turned his head slowly. "Help how?" Liam swallowed hard. "She has a foundation. She wanted to show me. Her name is Eleanor Whitmore." Noah's reaction was instant. His fork clattered onto the plate. His jaw clenched, and his eyes hardened like stone. "What?" Grace furrowed her brow. "Noah?" He stood up so abruptly that the chair scraped against the floor. "You're not going to see that woman again, Liam. Never again." Liam frowned. "But why?" The silence in the room was deafening. "She destroyed our lives." A shiver ran down Liam's spine. His father never spoke of the past, but the anger in his gaze revealed there was something buried there, and he needed to uncover the truth. Liam's life is already full of struggles, but what happens next will change everything. A storm is coming, and an unexpected encounter is about to turn his world upside down. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support is crucial for the growth of this channel. Now, let's see what fate has in store for Liam. Thank you for being here. The silence hanging in the small room felt suffocating. Noah's face was red with anger, his fists clenched on the table as if he were about to smash it. Grace, by the stove, watched everything with wide eyes, trying to gauge the severity of the situation. Liam, still shivering from the cold rain he had brought in with him, felt his stomach twist. "I'm not joking, Liam. You stay away from that woman," Noah repeated, his voice heavy with a weight Liam had never heard before. "But why?" he insisted, feeling frustration rise in his chest. "She just wants to help me." Noah slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware rattle. "She destroyed our lives!" His voice came out in a nearly hoarse tone, laden with bitterness. "And now she wants to throw you breadcrumbs, as if that could fix what she did?" Liam blinked, trying to process what he was hearing. He knew his father hated Eleanor Whitmore, but he had never fully understood why. Now, though, it seemed there was much more hidden in this story. "I don't get it," he said, his voice wavering. "You talk as if she did this on purpose, but what if that's not the case?" Noah let out a bitter laugh, throwing himself back in the chair. "You think a billionaire woman cares about people like us? You think she gives a damn? She bought the factory and, without a second thought, put hundreds of workers on the street. She didn't even care. All she cared about was profit. I spent 20 years in there, Liam, 20 years. And in a single meeting, she took everything from me." Liam's chest rose and fell rapidly. He didn't know what to say. Eleanor didn't seem like the cruel person his father described. But what if he was wrong? What if she really was all that? "But," he started, still trying to organize his thoughts, "what if she really just wants to help me now?" Noah let out a heavy sigh, rubbing his face with his hands. "I don't want you owing her anything. I don't want that woman to have any influence in your life. Do you understand?" Liam didn't respond. His heart was pounding, and he shifted his gaze to Grace, who remained silent, biting her lip. Noah then abruptly stood up from the table. "And don't even think about talking to her again. This isn't a request, Liam. It's an order." With that, he stormed out of the room, his footsteps heavy, and slammed the door to his bedroom. Liam stood there, feeling a mix of indignation and confusion swell inside him. Eleanor seemed genuine. What would she gain from this offer? And why did his father seem so desperate to keep him away from her? It was then that he heard a long sigh. He looked at his mother. Grace was holding the dish towel in her hands, as if lost in thought. When she realized Liam was watching her, she offered a sad smile. "Your father, he has reasons to feel this way. It was a very hard blow for him, Liam." "But he never talks about it," Liam shot back. "He always avoids the subject. It feels like there's something more there, something he doesn't want to tell." Grace hesitated for a moment before responding. "Maybe there is, but I don't know everything, Liam. I just know that ever since the factory closed, he's never been the same. He carries that anger with him every day." Liam lowered his head. He knew. He saw. His father was no longer the man he used to be. Before, Noah was a playful dad who came home tired from work, but always made time to tell stories or ask how Liam's day at school was. But now he was a bitter man, trapped in a past Liam couldn't even comprehend. Grace sighed again and placed her hand on her son's shoulder. "But there's something I need to tell you." Liam lifted his gaze. "What?" She pressed her lips together, as if carefully choosing her words. "I don't think this Eleanor is a bad person, and if she wants to help you, maybe it wouldn't be wrong to accept." Liam felt a knot form in his chest. He already imagined his mother thinking that way. She always saw the good in people, always tried to find a middle ground. "So why don't you tell Dad that?" Grace looked away, gripping the dish towel tighter. "Because he doesn't want to hear it. And because—" She hesitated. "I'm afraid of what might happen if he finds out you're considering this offer." Silence fell again. This time, it was a silence filled with doubts, fears, and unspoken thoughts. Liam took a deep breath. His mother was right. His father would never accept it. But Liam couldn't ignore the feeling that something didn't add up in this story. He needed to uncover the truth. And there was only one way to do that. That night, when he lay in bed, his eyes fixed on the dark ceiling. The wind still whistled outside. The rain had subsided. His father wouldn't give him answers. But Eleanor, maybe she would. And that's how Liam made his decision. The next day, without telling anyone, he would go looking for her again. Liam woke up early that morning, long before his father left the room. The decision he made the night before still weighed heavily on his mind, but he knew he couldn't turn back. Something inside him screamed that he needed to understand what was really happening. Why was Eleanor offering this opportunity? Why did his father hate her so much? And most importantly, why did he feel that this woman was not the monster Noah described? With utmost care, he got up, put on a worn jacket, and grabbed a cap to hide part of his face. If his father suspected he was going out to meet Eleanor, a new argument would certainly ensue. The path to the elegant cafe where he had met the woman the day before felt longer now. The city was still waking up. The wet sidewalks reflected the sunlight breaking through the buildings. He could feel his heart racing with each step. He didn't quite know what he expected to find, but one thing was certain. He was about to cross a line his father would never forgive. When he entered the cafe, he found Eleanor sitting at her usual table, a teapot beside her, and the same serene posture as always. But when she noticed Liam approaching, a smile spread across her face. "You came back," she said, as if she had been expecting him. Liam hesitated before sitting down. He still wasn't sure exactly what to say. Part of him felt he was betraying his father just by being there, but another part was eager for answers. "I needed to talk to you," he admitted, looking away. Eleanor poured herself a cup of tea and took a sip, seeming to measure her words before responding. "Then speak, dear. I'm listening." He took a deep breath, gathering courage. "My dad, he said you destroyed our lives, that you closed the factory and threw everyone into misery. But you don't seem like that kind of person. I don't understand." Eleanor's smile slowly faded, replaced by a look of sorrow. She gently set down her cup and clasped her hands on the table. "Your father is right to hate me," she said finally. "I closed the factory, and many families suffered because of it." Liam felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "But then, why do you want to help me?" She sighed. "Because I didn't close that factory out of cruelty or greed, Liam. It was a difficult decision, but a necessary one. There was something wrong inside, something that no one but me and a few others knew." Liam leaned forward. "What?" Eleanor opened her mouth to respond, but hesitated. Then she simply shook her head. "That's something you may need to discover for yourself in due time. What I can say now is that if I hadn't closed the factory, much worse things would have happened." Liam didn't know how to respond. He felt there was much more behind that story, but Eleanor clearly wouldn't divulge everything. At least, not yet. "But what about my dad?" he asked. "He spent 20 years in there. Do you really think he will believe you did this for a just reason?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "Cetus, I don't expect him to believe, Liam. I don't expect him to forgive me, but I hope you can look beyond his anger and see that there's always more than one version of the same story." Liam fell silent for a moment, processing that. His father would never accept hearing that side. He had already chosen his version of events. But what if Noah was hiding something too? The thought troubled him. "Anyway," Eleanor continued, pulling a small card from her bag. "That's not why I called you here today." She slid the card across the table. Liam picked it up and read it carefully. There was an elegant address and a highlighted name: Whitmore Foundation for Promising Youth. "I want you to come with me today. I want to show you something." Liam frowned. "What is this place?" Eleanor smiled. "A future." The drive to the foundation was short, but every minute in Eleanor's luxurious car made Liam feel out of place. He had never been in such an expensive vehicle with leather seats and a private driver. It all felt like a completely different world from his own. When they arrived at the address, Liam couldn't contain his shock. The building was immense, modern, with glass windows reflecting the sunlight. Right at the entrance, a shining metal sign read, "Whitmore Foundation, Education for a New Tomorrow." Liam swallowed hard. He had never imagined he would step into a place like this. Eleanor guided him through the spacious hallways, where well-dressed students walked by, holding books and tablets. The classrooms were equipped with modern computers, and the teachers seemed genuinely engaged with the students. It was different from any school Liam had ever seen. "Here," Eleanor said, stopping in front of a large glass room. Inside, young people his age were attending an interactive class on a digital whiteboard. These students come from various parts of the city. Many, like you, grew up without opportunities. But here, they have a chance to build a better future. Liam felt something tighten in his chest. He had always known the world was unequal, but seeing it all in front of his eyes was different. That place represented something he never thought he could have: a real future. Eleanor turned to him, her eyes kind. "I want you to study here, Liam. I want you to have the chance to learn, grow, and change your life." Shock washed over him. You're offering me a scholarship?" Eleanor nodded. "Full scholarship, all expenses covered. You just need to want it." Liam felt his throat dry up. The idea of studying in that place, finally having a path out of poverty, was tempting. But then, the image of his father flashed in his mind. The fury in his eyes. The words full of resentment. "My dad would never accept this," he murmured. Eleanor sighed, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I know, but the decision needs to be yours, Liam." He looked around once more. The students were smiling, chatting about books and projects. Everything there felt like an unattainable dream for someone like him. But could it be real? His mind was in turmoil. Accepting that offer would mean betraying his father? Or would it mean securing a future for his family? Liam took a deep breath. I need to think." Eleanor nodded. "Of course, but think carefully, dear. Time doesn't wait." When Liam returned home that night, his head was a whirlwind. He wanted to tell his mother, to share everything he had seen, but he knew he couldn't. If his father found out he was even considering Eleanor's proposal, things would get even worse. The living room was dark when he entered. Noah was sitting on the couch, his gaze fixed on the TV, but Liam knew he wasn't really watching. The atmosphere was heavy. "Where were you?" Noah asked, without diverting his eyes from the screen. Liam hesitated. "Out, trying to sell candies." It wasn't exactly a lie. He had gone out for that at the beginning of the day, but now his conscience weighed heavily. Noah turned to him, eyes narrowed. "I hope you didn't do anything stupid." Liam swallowed hard. "I didn't." Noah studied his son for a long moment, as if trying to see through him. Then he huffed and looked back at the TV. Liam clenched his fists. He hated lying. But what else could he do? As he climbed the stairs to his room, one thought fixed itself in his mind. If he wanted to understand the whole truth about his father and Eleanor, he would have to keep investigating. And perhaps that meant crossing a line from which he might not be able to return. Liam had a restless night. He tossed and turned in bed, his mind burdened with conflicting thoughts. Eleanor's offer was too good to refuse, but the furious expression on his father's face when he mentioned her still haunted him. He wanted to believe there had been a misunderstanding, that Eleanor wasn't the monster Noah described, but the feeling that something was being hidden only grew stronger within him. The next morning, Noah was already seated at the table when Liam came downstairs. His father's gaze weighed on him like lead, as if he were searching for any clue of what his son was hiding. Grace, on the other hand, wore a tired expression, her eyes downcast as she absent-mindedly stirred her coffee. "You were out late last night," Noah suddenly said, his voice slicing through the kitchen silence like a knife. Liam felt a chill run down his spine but tried to stay calm. "I was trying to sell more candy," he replied, sitting down and grabbing a slice of stale bread. Noah narrowed his eyes. "You came back late." "Yeah, the rain delayed me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Liam could feel his father's gaze burning into him, scrutinizing every word. Then Noah abruptly placed his cup on the table with a harsh thud. "Is this yours?" he asked, tossing a new notebook with a hard cover and clean pages onto the table. Liam froze. He had received the material from Eleanor's foundation. He had forgotten to hide it. "Where did you get this?" Noah demanded, his voice rising. Liam tried to think quickly. "I found it in the school's trash. Someone must have thrown it away." Noah didn't believe him for a second. He stood up sharply, grabbing the notebook and flipping through the pages as if searching for evidence against his son. His face was flushed, eyes filled with rage and hurt. "You lied to me," he growled. "You went after her, didn't you?" Grace quickly stood up, positioning herself between the two. "Noah, for God's sake, don't start this!" But Noah ignored her. His eyes were fixed on Liam, overflowing with fury. "I warned you! I told you to stay away from that woman!" Liam swallowed hard, feeling his throat tighten. "I just wanted to understand, Dad. Why do you hate her so much? What did she do that's so horrible?" Noah was silent for a moment, his chest heaving with heavy breaths. Then his expression changed. It was no longer just anger. There was something more there. Fear. "You don't know anything, Liam," he said, his voice a bit softer but laden with pain. "You're just a kid." Liam felt something break inside him. "Then make me understand. If she's so terrible, tell me what happened." Noah clenched his fists, looking away. He didn't respond. Instead, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Liam was left standing there, feeling a mix of anger and frustration. His father didn't want him to know the truth, but now, more than ever, he was determined to find out. At the same moment, in a sophisticated office in the city center, Eleanor Whitmore sat in front of a stack of documents. Across from her sat a man in a dark suit, serious demeanor, and sharp gaze, sliding an envelope across the table. "These are the first pieces of information we've gathered regarding the factory closure," he said. Eleanor took the envelope and opened it, examining the papers. They were copies of contracts, financial reports, and some suspicious transactions. "And?" she asked, keeping her gaze steady on the detective. The man adjusted his glasses before responding. "There's something strange in the records, Mrs. Whitmore. Officially, the factory was closed due to financial issues, but we've uncovered evidence of internal sabotage, damaged machinery, falsified documents. Everything points to someone from within the company. Eleanor took a deep breath. I knew it. The detective continued. Noah Hayes' name appeared in some reports. It seems he was accused of involvement, but the files on this were buried quickly, almost as if someone wanted to protect him or hide something much bigger. Eleanor furrowed her brow. And who was above him? Who would have an interest in covering this up? The detective pulled out another document and pointed to a name, Russell McCain. Eleanor felt her stomach churn. I know that name. He was the factory manager before everything fell apart. But why would he be behind this? The detective crossed his arms. Russell disappeared shortly before the closure. He received a large sum of money and vanished. If someone profited from this scandal, it was him. Eleanor fell silent for a moment. That name brought back bad memories. She had always suspected something was wrong inside the factory, but she had never been able to prove it. Now, however, a new piece of the puzzle had emerged. Keep investigating, she finally said. I want to know everything about this man. Meanwhile, Liam was determined to find his own answers. After leaving home, he decided to return to Eleanor's foundation. He needed to uncover more about what happened at the factory and, if possible, find some proof that would explain his father's anger. This time, when he arrived, Eleanor wasn't there, but one of the staff, a middle-aged man with graying hair named Robert, recognized him. You're Liam, right? The kid who helped Mrs. Whitmore? Liam nodded. Yes, I need information. My dad worked at the factory before it closed. I want to know the truth about what happened. Robert hesitated, casting a worried glance around. The truth isn't so simple, kid. I know, Liam said, but no one is telling me anything. I need to find out for myself. The man sighed, scratching his beard. I worked at that factory for 20 years. I knew your father. He was a good man. But there was a scandal, and some people fell to protect others. Liam frowned. What are you talking about? Robert looked around, as if fearing being overheard. Then he lowered his voice. The factory didn't close just because of financial problems. Someone was sabotaging the machines. It was a dirty game. Your father's name came up in the records, but no one could ever prove anything against him. The real culprit was never caught. Liam's heart raced. Who was it? Robert hesitated before saying the name. Russell McCain. Liam blinked. Who? He was the factory manager, a smart, manipulative guy. One day, he just vanished. But I always thought he knew a lot more than he let on. Liam felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't know this name, but if McCain was involved, it meant his father's story was more complicated than he had thought. How can I find him? Robert shook his head. No one knows where he is, but if Eleanor is investigating, maybe she'll find out. Liam swallowed hard. What else was his father hiding? Did Noah know about Russell? Or was there something even worse that he didn't want Liam to discover? Outside the foundation, a man in a dark suit watched the conversation from a distance. He pulled out his phone and made a call. We have a problem, he said, his voice low and threatening. The Hayes family is getting too close to Eleanor. On the other end of the line, a cold laugh echoed. Then it's time to send a warning. Liam had no idea he was now being watched, and that his quest for the truth could put everyone in danger. The phone rang sharply in the silence of the small living room. Noah, sitting on the edge of the sofa with his elbows resting on his knees, stared at the device as if it were a ghost. His heart raced. He recognized that number. It was one he never wanted to see again. He took a deep breath before answering, his voice trembling with tension. "What do you want?" His question came out like a growl. On the other end of the line, a low, venomous laugh filled the silence. "Noah Hayes. It's been a while." Russell McCain's voice was cold, controlled, yet laced with a threatening tone. "I heard your boy is getting a bit too curious, getting involved with old Whitmore, seeking answers he shouldn't be." Noah gripped the phone so tightly that the knuckles turned white. "He doesn't know anything," he replied through clenched teeth. "But he's close to finding out," Russell shot back. "And you know what that means. I warned you, didn't I? If you kept your head down, if you stayed away, none of this would come back to haunt you. But now, you're playing with fire, Noah. And believe me, that fire burns." Noah suddenly stood up, pacing the room. "What do you want?" "Simple. Control your son. Make him forget this story. If you don't do that—" Russell paused, and Noah could hear the sound of a lighter being flicked on from the other end of the line. "I'll tell everything." Noah felt his chest tighten. Sweat dripped down his neck, despite the cold of the apartment. "You wouldn't do that." "Do you have any idea how many things I've already done, Noah? I've destroyed entire companies. You think I'd have any problem destroying a poor guy like you?" Noah closed his eyes, trying to calm the storm in his mind. But it was useless. Russell always knew how to poison everything. "Don't you dare come near him," Noah warned. "Then do the right thing," Russell said, and the line went silent. Noah stood there, staring into the void. His breath was short, ragged. He felt trapped. Again, just like so many years ago. The past hit him like a punch to the gut. The factory. The sound of machines running, the smell of oil and burnt metal in the air. He had worked there for 15 years when Russell McCain called him in for a private chat. "You work hard, Noah." Russell smiled, throwing an arm over his shoulder. "But hard work doesn't always pay the bills, does it?" At the time, Noah didn't immediately understand what he meant, but Russell was direct. There was a scheme happening inside the factory. Embezzlement, deliberately broken machines, inflated purchases. A scheme that lined the pockets of managers while the workers thought they were just facing tough times. "Do you want a promotion? A bonus? A guarantee that your family will never go hungry again?" Russell asked, looking Noah in the eye. "You just need to tweak a few controls. Discreetly sabotage some parts. Small failures here and there. Nothing that will hurt anyone. Just enough for the right people to make money." Noah hesitated. He wasn't a corrupt man, but he was tired. Tired of seeing Grace working late, tired of seeing Liam still small, wearing clothes that no longer fit. The factory salary wasn't enough. "What if I say no?" he asked. Russell smiled. "Then you lose your job, and I'll make sure no one else will hire you. But if you say yes, you can finally give your family the life they deserve." Noah stood there, feeling the weight of the choice, and in the end, he agreed. For a while, everything seemed fine. He followed the instructions, made small modifications to equipment, nothing noticeable. The extra payments came in discreetly. He could buy better things for Liam, pay off bills. But then Eleanor Whitmore showed up. She bought the factory, started an audit, and within weeks, the fraudulent numbers began to surface. Noah found himself cornered. He didn't know the extent of the corruption within the company. He just did his part, believing it was something small. But now, everything was coming to light. And then, Russell disappeared, leaving him behind. When the factory closed, when hundreds lost their jobs, the rumors began to circulate. And somehow, someway, Noah managed to evade the charges. But the fear remained. The fear that one day someone would dig deep enough to find his name in the mud. Now it seemed that day had finally come. He jolted back to the present. The phone was still in his hand. The sound of a door opening made him turn. Grace walked into the room, frowning at the sight of him, pale and lost in thought. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," Noah replied quickly, shoving the phone into his pocket. But she wasn't falling for the lie. "Noah, what's going on? You haven't been the same for weeks, and now you're trying to keep Liam away from something that could clearly help him. He has the right to know what's going on." Noah ran his hands over his face. "You don't understand, Grace. This is dangerous." "What's dangerous?" she pressed. "You need to tell me the truth." Noah closed his eyes. He couldn't. If he told the truth, he would lose everything. He would lose his family. He would lose Liam, the son who still saw him as a dignified man. "I just need you to trust me," he said. Grace took a step back, crossing her arms. "I can't trust a man who doesn't trust me." The words hit hard, but before Noah could say anything, the door opened again. Liam walked in, looking suspiciously at his parents. "What's going on?" he asked. Grace looked at Noah, expecting him to speak, but his silence was the last straw. "Liam, go get your things," she said. "We're leaving here." Noah's eyes widened. "What?" "I'm done with this, Noah. If you can't trust me and your own son to tell the truth, then I can't stay here." Liam stood frozen, shocked. "Mom." "I'm not joking, Noah. Either you tell the truth, or I'm leaving with him." Noah felt his throat tighten. He wanted to tell. But how could he tell his own son that the one responsible for the unemployment, the poverty, for all the pain they had endured, was him? Before he could respond, the phone rang again. Noah glanced at the device, feeling a chill. Eleanor Whitmore. The truth was coming to light, and he could no longer run from it. Tensions are at their peak. Noah is hiding something, Liam is searching for the truth, and a dangerous man is watching from the shadows. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment. Your support helps this channel grow and bring you more gripping stories like this one. Now, let's dive back into the mystery. Thank you for your support. Liam stared at his father, hoping he would say something, anything, that justified all that evasive and bitter behavior. But Noah only looked away, his jaw clenched as if bearing that burden alone was his only option. Grace, arms crossed, observed him with the same impatience, the atmosphere in the small living room thick with suffocating tension. The phone kept ringing. Eleanor Whitmore's name flashed on the screen. Noah didn't answer. He merely clenched his fist, as if the annoying sound of the phone was a painful reminder of everything he was trying to bury. He could no longer run away, but he also wasn't ready to face the consequences. "Are you going to answer?" Liam asked, crossing his arms. Noah turned his back, grabbing the apartment key from the table. "I'm leaving. Don't wait up for dinner." He walked out before anyone could react, slamming the door behind him. Grace let out a heavy sigh and sat down on the couch, pressing her fingers against her temples. "This is going too far." Liam sat beside her, still trying to process everything. With each new piece of the puzzle he managed to find, it seemed another layer of mystery emerged. His father was hiding something big, something that made him tremble with fear. "If he doesn't want to tell me, I'll find out on my own," Liam declared, determined. Grace looked at her son, surprised. "Liam, I know something is very wrong. He doesn't want to talk, but there's someone who can." He picked up his phone and glanced at the card that Eleanor had given him. It had the contact information of the private detective she had hired to investigate the factory's closure. If anyone knew the truth, it was him. Night fell over Chicago, the streetlights casting orange shadows on the wet streets. Liam waited outside a small office on the outskirts of downtown, the address he found while searching for the name on the card. The detective's name was Thomas Reed, a tall, thin man with a sharp gaze who always seemed to be one step ahead in any conversation. When he opened the door and saw Liam standing there, he raised an eyebrow. "And you must be?" "Liam Hayes," he replied quickly. "I think Ms. Whitmore hired you to investigate what happened to my father's factory. I need answers." The detective observed the boy for a moment, assessing him. "You're brave, kid, but digging into the past might not be a good idea." "I don't have a choice," Liam insisted. "My father is sinking in this. He doesn't want to tell me the truth, but I know something is wrong. Please." Thomas sighed and opened the door wider, letting Liam in. The office was small, but filled with stacked files and a large bulletin board where newspaper clippings and photos were connected by red strings. There was an open folder on the desk with documents that Liam couldn't immediately understand. "What do you know so far?" Thomas asked, pulling out a chair and sitting down. Liam hesitated. "I know the factory closed because of sabotage. My dad says Eleanor is to blame, but something tells me that's not the whole story. There's a man named Russell McCain, right?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "You've heard that name?" "He called my dad today. It sounded like a threat." The detective leaned forward, visibly intrigued. "So he's starting to act again." Liam felt a shiver run down his spine. "Who is he?" Thomas picked up one of the files and opened it, revealing a photo of a middle-aged man with a stern face and a disingenuous smile. Russell McCain was the administrative manager of the factory before it was bought by Eleanor. He was part of a fraudulent scheme, embezzling money and sabotaging machines to force the company to collapse. When Eleanor took over and began auditing the accounts, the bomb exploded. But before anyone could blame him, he disappeared. Thomas pointed to a series of bank records. But he didn't leave empty-handed. He received quite generous payments before he vanished. Liam furrowed his brow. "And my dad? Was he involved?" The detective exhaled slowly. "I still don't have concrete evidence, but everything indicates that Noah wasn't one of the leaders of the scheme. He was used, manipulated. But the problem is, he accepted it." Liam felt his stomach churn. "He accepted?" "I know it must be hard to hear this, kid," Thomas said, his tone softer. "But your father was part of something big. Maybe he was coerced. Maybe he thought it was just a small favor. But in the end, he helped sink his own factory." The ground seemed to vanish beneath Liam. His father was a man he had always seen as someone who suffered an injustice. But what if, deep down, he had also been part of the problem? Before he could respond, Thomas's phone vibrated. The detective picked up the device and looked at the screen with a serious expression. "It's Ms. Whitmore," he answered. "Yes? What?" There was a brief silence. "Understood. I'm on my way." Thomas hung up and looked at Liam. "Eleanor wants to talk to me. It seems she found something about Russell, something big." Liam stood up. "I'm going with you." The detective hesitated but saw the determination in the boy's eyes that couldn't be extinguished. "All right, but stay quiet and listen. You're getting into something dangerous." Meanwhile, in the Hayes family apartment, Noah paced back and forth, his heart racing. He had just received another call from Russell. This time it wasn't just threats. "If you don't make that kid stop, I'm going after him," Russell had said. "And then, my old friend, I can't guarantee he'll come out of it unscathed." Noah felt a fear he hadn't experienced in years. If Russell was willing to threaten Liam directly, then things were spiraling out of control. He needed to stop this. But before he could do anything, he heard the door open. Grace walked in, her gaze filled with suspicion. "Where is Liam?" Noah blinked, confused. "What do you mean? He's not here?" Grace's expression turned pale. "He left hours ago, Noah. He's not answering his phone." Noah felt a chill run up his spine. Oh my God. He knew exactly where Liam had gone. And if he didn't act quickly, his son might become Russell McCain's next victim. The rain battered the city, heavy drops falling like sharp needles onto the dark streets of Chicago. Lightning sliced through the sky, briefly illuminating the worn buildings and deserted alleys. The cold wind hissed through the back streets, carrying with it a scent of rust and abandonment. Noah parked his car a few blocks away from the abandoned factory. His fingers trembled as they gripped the steering wheel. He knew he was walking into the eye of the storm, but he saw no other option. Russell wasn't bluffing. If he had decided to return to Chicago, it was because he wanted something, and if he didn't get it, he wouldn't hesitate to destroy everyone around him. Noah got out of the car and walked down the pothole-ridden street, the water pooling and soaking his boots. The rusty gate of the factory stood ajar. The place had been abandoned for years, yet it still exuded a smell of old oil and corroded metal. The broken windows and graffiti-covered walls made the scene seem even darker under the storm. With each thunderclap, the structure trembled slightly, as if it might collapse at any moment. He entered. The darkness was thick, cut only by the dim light of a street lamp outside. In the middle of the warehouse, under a pale glow, stood Russell McCain. The man looked exactly as Noah remembered. Tall, broad-shouldered, with gray hair and a treacherous smile plastered on his face. He wore a dark overcoat, and his presence radiated danger. Time had not softened him at all. On the contrary, his cold eyes said he was there to collect what was his. "I knew you would come, Noah." Russell's voice echoed through the empty warehouse. "You were never good at running away." Noah clenched his fists but maintained a firm expression. "What do you want?" Russell tilted his head slightly, as if the question amused him. "You know very well. Money." Noah scoffed, laughing bitterly. "If I had money, do you think we'd still be living in a crumbling apartment?" Russell smiled, but it was a smile devoid of humor. "I don't care about your problems, Noah. I gave you a chance to get rich back then. You threw it away. Now you owe me." "I owe you nothing," Noah growled, taking a step forward. "I've paid dearly enough for listening to you." Russell remained unfazed. He slowly pulled out a stack of papers from his coat pocket and opened them. "You talk as if you have a choice, but you've forgotten the records, the evidence we've kept?" He held the papers up for Noah to see. "All I need to do is hand this over to the police, and then, well, I don't even need to say how Mrs. Whitmore will react when she finds out you're not as innocent as you pretend to be." Noah's heart raced. He felt cold sweat trickling down his forehead, despite the chilly weather. He was cornered. "You wouldn't do that?" "Try me," Russell replied, folding the papers back and putting them in his pocket. "But I'm a reasonable man. We can resolve this without involving the police." "How?" $20,000. Noah let out a bitter laugh. "This is a nightmare. I can barely afford rent. How the hell do you expect me to come up with $20,000? Russell scrutinized him for a moment, then smirked. "You have a talented son," his voice dripped with malice. "Maybe Mrs. Whitmore would like to pay for a prodigy." Noah froze. He felt the air rush out of his lungs. "No," he growled. "You won't lay a finger on my son." Russell stepped closer, his face turning into a dark mask. "Then pay me." Liam and Grace ran down the deserted street, the storm making everything harder. The wind seemed to push them back, and the rain blinded their eyes. But they couldn't stop. Not now. "Are you sure he's here?" Grace shouted against the wind. "Yes," Liam replied, panting. "The detective said Russell was back, and if that bastard is threatening my dad—" Grace tightened her coat around her body and kept running. She knew Noah was hiding something, but she never imagined it would be this serious. And now, the man who haunted him was back. They spotted the abandoned factory in the distance. The ajar gate swung in the wind, creaking like a sinister warning. Liam didn't think twice. He entered. What he saw made his heart stop. His father stood facing a tall man, a stranger with harsh features and predatory eyes. The tension between the two was almost palpable. And then, Liam heard the words that changed everything. "You have a talented son," Russell said. "Perhaps Mrs. Whitmore would like to pay for a prodigy." Noah clenched his fists, his expression wild. "No." Liam felt a chill of horror. Russell slowly turned his face and saw Liam standing in the doorway. A cold smile crept across his lips. "Ah, look who's here." Noah turned, and his face paled at the sight of his son. "Liam, get out of here, now!" But Liam didn't move. His eyes were fixed on Russell. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling but firm. Russell laughed. "Ask your father." Liam looked at Noah, waiting for an answer. But all he saw was hesitation, fear. "Tell me," he demanded. Before Noah could respond, a new voice echoed through the warehouse. "That's exactly what I wanted to know." Everyone turned. Eleanor Whitmore stood at the entrance, accompanied by Thomas Reed and 2 armed police officers. Russell's face hardened. "Damn old woman!" Eleanor walked forward with her cane, her eyes hidden behind dark lenses, but her presence was imposing. "I've spent years trying to discover who really destroyed my factory," she said, her voice icy calm. "And now, I finally see the last link in the chain." Russell laughed, but it was a forced laugh. "You think you can stop me, Eleanor? I have evidence against Noah. If I go down, he goes down with me." Eleanor moved a little closer. "You underestimate my preparation, McCain." She extended her hand to Thomas, who handed her a thick envelope. "Here are all the bank records proving you embezzled money before the sabotage. Documents linking you to offshore accounts. Testimonies from former employees who knew what you were doing." She lifted her chin. "You can't blackmail me because I already have everything I need to bury you." Russell stood still. His eyes shifted from Eleanor to the police officers. He was cornered. "This is a trap," he spat. "No," Eleanor replied. "This is justice." For a moment, Russell seemed to consider running. But then the police stepped forward, guns drawn. "Don't try it," one of them warned. Russell let out a heavy breath, his posture crumbling. He knew he was finished. The police approached and handcuffed him. Russell didn't resist, but his furious gaze met Noah's before he was taken away. "You should have been with me, Hayes, but now you'll sink alone." Noah didn't respond. He was paralyzed. It was only when Russell disappeared through the door, escorted away, that he finally broke. His legs gave way, and he fell to his knees on the cold ground. Liam looked at his father, his chest tight. "Dad!" Noah raised his tear-filled eyes to him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything." And then he broke down in tears. Liam felt a knot in his throat. He knew his father had made mistakes. But for the first time, Noah was ready to face them. And that perhaps was the beginning of something new. The silence that engulfed the abandoned factory after Russell McCain's arrest felt more deafening than any scream. The echo of the police officer's footsteps fading through the warehouse resonated like a heavy relief, but a storm still raged within each person present. Noah remained kneeling on the cold floor, his shoulders trembling slightly, as the weight of years of guilt seemed to finally crumble upon him. Liam stood there, watching his father. A knot tightened in his throat, a whirlwind of emotions battling inside him. He wanted to feel anger. He wanted to scream at his father for all those years of silence and for all the lies that had kept them trapped in misery. But at the same time, he saw a broken man before him, a man who, despite everything, was still his father. Eleanor stood firm, her cane steady in her hand, her lips pressed together as she processed everything that had just happened. Detective Thomas Reed cleared his throat, capturing everyone's attention. "Dad, as you just witnessed," he said, looking at Eleanor. "Russell McCain was the key piece of this whole plot." He pulled out a small device, an audio recording. He was careless enough to leave some phone calls recorded. And now we have concrete evidence of his involvement in embezzlement and the sabotage of the factory. The sound of Russell's voice echoed from the device, his arrogance clear in the recording. He spoke of bribes, blackmail, and how he used Noah as a puppet to destroy the company's credibility before disappearing with the money. Noah's body stiffened upon hearing that. He already knew everything, but hearing it come out of Russell's mouth so cynically was a blow. He lowered his head, taking a deep breath. Eleanor crossed her arms. "So this is it," she murmured. "The final piece of the puzzle." The police officers in the background nodded in agreement. "With this evidence, he will be formally charged and convicted. We should be able to secure a heavy sentence for him," one of the officers stated. Detective Reed put the device away and turned to Eleanor. "And now?" Eleanor sighed. "Now," she replied, turning to Noah. "It's just you I have to deal with." Noah slowly lifted his gaze, and although Eleanor couldn't see him, she felt the fear and regret radiating from him. His voice faltered. He ran a hand over his face before trying again. "I can't hide anymore. Not after all this." He forced himself to stand, swaying slightly. Grace rushed to help him, but he raised a hand, signaling her to wait. Then he turned to Eleanor. "I was part of this. I didn't want to believe it, but I was. I was naive and weak. I accepted a dirty deal, thinking I was protecting my family. But all I did was condemn them to years of misery and lies. The silence weighed heavily in the air. Liam felt his chest tighten. Noah took a deep breath and continued. I know you have every right to formally accuse me, and if you want, I will accept. There's no excuse for what I did. I just want to say that I regret everything. His eyes turned to Liam, and I want my son to know the truth, all of it, before it's too late. Liam stared at his father, his mind struggling to process everything. He hadn't expected such a raw, open confession. He didn't know how to react. Eleanor remained still for a few seconds, as if weighing Noah's words. Then she finally broke the silence. A while ago, she began, her voice firm, yet tinged with a hidden sadness. I would have turned you in without a second thought. I spent years feeling responsible for the closure of that factory. Years being hated by families who depended on it. But now, I know that Russell was the true poison behind it all. She stepped closer, her cane lightly tapping against the floor. But you are not innocent, Noah. You made mistakes. You chose the wrong path. You destroyed your own life and that of your family with that decision. Noah lowered his head, bracing for the worst. But then Eleanor sighed. But maybe you've paid enough for that. Noah's head shot up in surprise. What? I won't file charges against you, Eleanor declared, but there's a condition. Noah's heart raced. Anything. Eleanor raised her chin, her posture commanding. You will confess this to the entire town. You will publicly admit your guilt. And you will make amends by helping the community that suffered from the factory's closure. If you do that, I won't take you to justice. Noah stood frozen, absorbing her words. Then he took a deep breath and nodded. I will do it. Liam didn't know how to feel. Part of him was still confused, hurt by the truth. But deep down, he knew his father needed this chance. In the days that followed, the news spread like wildfire. Russell McCain's arrest made headlines in local newspapers. The former factory workers learned that, although Noah had been involved in the sabotage, he was also a victim of Russell's manipulation. The town was divided between those who still saw him as a traitor and those who began to understand him. However, the most impactful event was when Noah climbed onto a small stage set up in a community center and, before former colleagues, neighbors, and journalists, confessed everything. I was wrong, he said, his voice trembling. There's no other way to say it. I did something terrible, and my family paid the price for years. But I can't keep hiding. I want to do whatever I can to make it right. The crowd murmured among themselves, some still casting judgmental looks, while others were softer. But then something unexpected happened. One of the former factory employees, a middle-aged man named Martin, stood up. Regret doesn't change what happened, he said, his voice steady. But admitting it is a start. And then, much to everyone's surprise, he began to applaud. Little by little, others joined in. It wasn't unanimous. There was still resentment in many hearts. But the wheels were beginning to turn. Liam watched from the audience, his mother beside him. Eleanor sat in the front row, listening intently. When Noah stepped off the stage, he found his son's gaze. Liam hesitated for a moment, but then stepped forward and, without saying a word, embraced him. It was a strong hug, laden with feelings, wounds, and silent forgiveness. Never again, Liam murmured. Never again keep a secret like this. Noah nodded, holding his son tightly. Grace watched the scene with tears in her eyes. Eleanor, standing next to her, sighed, almost as if a weight had lifted from her shoulders. The past could not be erased. But perhaps, just perhaps, a new future could begin there. The wind gently blew on that sunny morning, carrying with it an air of renewal. The clear blue sky, free of clouds, reflected the grandeur of the event about to take place. The large courtyard of the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation was adorned with white and gold banners, symbolizing a new beginning. Chairs were arranged in rows, a small stage stood at the center with a podium, and a crowd slowly gathered, composed of community members, journalists, and former employees of the old factory. Liam walked slowly among the guests, absorbing every detail around him. Now, at 15, he was taller, more mature. His eyes, once filled with uncertainty, shone with determination. The elite school uniform he wore fit him well, but that was not what defined him. What truly mattered was the journey he had taken to get there. He approached a small group of peers, students from the foundation who had received scholarships just like him. They greeted him with enthusiasm. Liam remembered the day he first stepped into that place, marveling at the impeccable infrastructure, the clean and shiny hallways, the classrooms equipped with modern computers, and the teachers who encouraged him to dream big. Now, he was not just a student at that school. He was a symbol of what education and a second chance could achieve. In the background, Noah watched his son with quiet pride. He wore a simple yet well-pressed shirt, with a badge hanging around his neck, indicating his new role as the coordinator of one of the foundation's social projects. 2 years earlier, he would never have imagined he would have the opportunity to rebuild his life. The scars of the past were still there, but now he no longer carried the weight of guilt alone. Eleanor, beside him, with her elegant posture and serene face, also seemed satisfied to see Liam interacting with the other young people. "He has changed so much," Noah commented, his voice filled with emotion. "I don't even know how to thank you for all of this." Eleanor smiled faintly, tapping her cane on the ground. Although her eyes could no longer see, she felt the positive energy around her. "Since he made his own journey, Noah," she replied calmly, "I merely showed the way. But it was you who had the courage to face the truth and give him the freedom to choose his future." Noah nodded, contemplative. For a long time, he had been a man imprisoned by his own pride and past mistakes. Now, he felt part of something larger, something that truly mattered. The crowd began to organize as the event approached. Grace appeared beside Noah, adjusting her hair with a radiant smile. "Is everything ready?" she asked, holding her small bag. Noah looked around and took a deep breath. "I think so." On the other side of the courtyard, a master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage and tested the microphone, capturing everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the inauguration ceremony of the new wing of the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation, Unity and Renewal." A round of applause echoed through the environment as the spotlight turned to the stage. Eleanor walked, aided by her cane, to the center, and an assistant held her arm to guide her to the podium. She positioned herself firmly and tilted her head slightly, as if sensing the presence of everyone there. "Many years ago," she began, her voice filled with emotion and authority, "this city went through a dark period. Families lost their livelihoods. Despair took hold of many homes. And for a long time, I carried a burden that, although not entirely mine, weighed on me as if it were. People listened in respectful silence. Some former employees of the old factory were there, attentive to her words. But life gives us opportunities for redemption," Eleanor continued. "When I met Liam Hayes, I saw in him something I hadn't seen in a long time: hope. I saw a boy who refused to be beaten down by difficulties, who even in adversity maintained kindness and strength. And through him, I saw an entire city ready to rise again. Liam felt a lump in his throat upon hearing that. He had never imagined that one day he would be mentioned in such an important speech. Eleanor continued, "Today, we inaugurate a space dedicated to education and new beginnings. The Unity and Renewal Wing is not just a name. It is a symbol of what we can achieve when we extend a hand to one another. And no one better represents that spirit than the young man I am about to call to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Liam Hayes." The audience erupted in applause. Liam took a deep breath and walked to the stage. He climbed the steps with firm strides and looked out at the audience, feeling the weight of that moment. There was something powerful about being there, in front of so many people, about to say words that could inspire those facing the same difficulties he once had. He held the microphone and, for a brief moment, closed his eyes. Images of his journey flashed through his mind. The nights selling candy in the rain, the disappointed look on his father's face, the day he met Eleanor, the anger at discovering the truth about the factory sabotage, the struggle to lift his family up. Each piece of that story had led him to that moment. He opened his eyes and smiled. 2 years ago, I couldn't have imagined I would be here, he began, his voice strong yet filled with emotion. I was just a boy trying to help my family survive. I believed my life was destined to be hard forever. But I learned something very important. The truth always finds a way to come out. And when it does, it is up to us to decide what to do with it. The audience listened attentively. Eleanor smiled, proud. For a long time, my family lived in the shadow of a past mistake. A mistake that cost us everything. But we discovered that the truth, no matter how painful, can also be liberating. Today, my father is no longer the man haunted by guilt and anger. He is a man who chose to make amends for the past and build a better future. And I am a boy who had the chance to change my story. Liam paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. What I want to say is, no one has to face life alone. There is always someone willing to lend a hand, even if it comes from where we least expect it. And that's why this place is so important. Here, young people like me will have the chance to write new stories, to change their destinies, just like I had the opportunity to change mine. The applause started again, but he raised his hand, indicating that he was not finished yet. So, if there's one thing I want to leave today, it's this message. Never let fear or pride keep you from accepting help, because together, we can find the strength we thought we didn't have. The audience stood up in ovation. Liam stepped back from the microphone, feeling warmth in his chest. He looked at Noah, who was holding back tears, and at Grace, who was smiling with teary eyes. Eleanor sat, her expression serene, as if this were the conclusion she had always hoped for. The Master of Ceremonies returned to the microphone. With that, we officially conclude the inauguration of the Unity and Renewal Wing. Thank you all. Liam descended from the stage and walked to his family. Noah said nothing. He just embraced him tightly. Grace quickly joined them. Eleanor, nearby, smiled faintly. A reporter approached, holding a microphone. Liam, do you have anything to say to those who have yet to find a way out of their difficulties? Liam looked at Eleanor, then at his father, and replied, Yes, never lose hope. Because sometimes, help comes from where we least expect it. And when it happens, have the courage to accept it. He looked at Noah and Eleanor and hugged them, sealing that moment as proof that forgiveness truth, and unity were stronger than any mistake from the past. And with that, a new story began. Life has a way of leading us down unexpected paths, but in the end, the truth always finds its way to the surface. Liam's journey was never just about escaping poverty. It was about learning the power of integrity, forgiveness, and resilience. Noah faced his past, Grace fought for her family, and Eleanor proved that sometimes the people we least expect can change our lives forever. This story reminds us that redemption is possible, and the weight of our mistakes does not have to define our future. But the question remains, how far would you go to uncover the truth? And would you have the courage to forgive? Let us know in the comments. What was the most powerful moment in this story for you? Before you go, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next powerful story. Leave a like if this story moved you, and share your thoughts in the comments. Watch the next incredible story by clicking the card on the screen. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.